So Surya, we saw the last example, and in that it was very important to be precise as black, and also how to defend. Here, what are we looking at?
We are looking at another theoretical example. Couple of things also before we go through this. I think it's very important to periodically, revisit some of these positions. So even if some of you know this kind of positions, it's good to revisit. You saw how Magnus made a mistake against Levon, or let's say my game. There are so many examples on this. Like we will see through it. That's also the reason when I was also working with Anand, there would be phases when he is revising or going through very basic endgames.
Okay.
Whether it's rook bishop versus rook or basic rook pawn endgames, but just to go through one more time.
Keep it fresh in his mind.
Yeah, and end of this course, you will also realize that how complicated it can get. So you will just be aware, like even if you know a lot of stuff, you will understand with utmost clarity that how many things you still don't know.
Okay.
So that's good to know.
Absolutely.
In general. Yeah, it's better than to have this illusion, oh, I know everything, I have read this book, I have done that course, I know everything. The stronger you get, the clearer you know how much you don't know. So
I'm absolutely in sync with what you say, because I think it's always very complicated. If you're sitting at home and trying to solve it, perhaps it's easy, but the real challenge is to get it right during the pressure of the clock ticking by.
Yes,
During a tournament.
That's why I really like to get to the basics first. Like one thing is to memorize. I know many players, they actually know the winning method here and they will say, oh yeah, this is this. But I also like to explain to some people, because then I actually get a clarity if I know this clearly or not.
Got it.
Not just memorization. I can just give you, oh, here this and this is winning. But if I'm unable to explain it to you, that means I don't understand this position at all.
Right.
So getting back to the position, once again the same thing. If we can get king e8, we are done.
Right.
That's not happening. However, one thing is to spot that rook is on the b file.
So it's slightly closer to the king.
Yeah. So the first thing would be, let's just play rook a1 and win the game. No, the rook is on the shorter side and
give a check and
we are done. One move like this, the game is drawn now.
Right.
By the way, didn't we say that rook on b file is losing?
Yeah.
Earlier we said that, right? But now we are saying, now if rook b7 check, let's say king d6, rook b6 check, let's say king d7, rook b7 check. If you remember the same position we had with the rook on d8 in the previous position, and we were playing king c6, then we said it was winning because he could not play rook a7 due to rook d7 check, and he could not play rook b2 because we would play e7 and it's queening. But this position he will play rook b2. Now you cannot play e7 because I'll start checking from the behind.
Right.
I'll give rook. I'll start. I'll play king f7.
Yeah. If e7, then
just king f7. Yeah.
King f7.
King f7.
And if king moves here, then I can give a check.
So suddenly this position becomes a draw. But there is also another psychology. Again, this is for practical players. This is not applicable in endgames, but in any position. Logically, you will start your calculation with rook a1. There is no way you can start calculation with any other move. It doesn't make sense. Now, once you go to rook a1 position, like, okay, rook a1 and whatever we saw, let's just go all the way till, all the way till rook b2. Rook b2, yeah. And you see e7 is not happening. So, which means you stumbled into a block, right? A variation which is not working. The tendency of mind is to immediately change. Like, oh, this is not working, let's move on to something else. Another idea which is applicable in any phase of the game is to ask yourself, why is this not working? And to add something else. What would have happened if the king is on g6 in the current position?
If the king was here, then maybe white can play rook e1.
Exactly.
With the idea of queen.
Exactly. So if you just make this point, then in the starting position, if the king is on g6, then you can do the same trick. Right. Now we go back to the starting position.
Just one question here, Surya. If I cut your king off this way, I still cannot win.
This is very, very important. This is very important. Now black has one clean way but he also has the liberty to play any random move and still it's a draw. Clean way is to play rook a2.
Take the long side.
Take the long side. You now you switch back to the position which we saw before. But you can still afford to play rook c2 check. I don't recommend this. But you can still afford to do this. But after king d7 or something, now you must go back. There is no other option. You might ask why not rook c1 here, because again king f6. And again I go back. Yeah?
Correct.
So then we know in the starting position, if the king is on g6, we are winning. In the previous question, I said, like, every position, ask yourself, what is my opponent threatening? Do I need to stop it? It's very good habit. What is black going to do if it was his move?
Same position if black to move. If he tries to move
the
here,
rook, then okay, then we play rook a8.
And with the idea of maybe
and
king.
This time your rook is on b5. So I will eventually get the position with the rook on d8, not on a1, right? So then otherwise you have to play king g6. Once you play king g6, then I switch back to the other variation and then I am winning.
Right.
So now we know why we have to waste a tempo. The only way to waste a tempo will be through our king. We cannot move our rook because then black rook takes the f5. But there are two ways. You can do it king d7, king d6, king e7, or the other way around. And only one of them is winning. So how to make it work? Let's say if you go king d7.
Yeah.
You play king f6. You play e7. King f7. Draw.
This is a very well-known draw, right?
Yes.
3 pieces like this and the rook controlling the queening square.
Yes, yes. And you cannot move the rook because of rook b7 check. So that's why in the starting position, the only move is king d6. Now here is what I dislike. If somebody says, hey, I know this is just king d6, king d7, king e7. So you really need to know the reasoning. Once you know the reasoning, you will not forget it.
Because
otherwise,
now
Ganguly,
this...
Surya,
yeah,
and Tanya pointing it out. Yes, that's the difference.
So here the check comes, and otherwise, if something like king f8, I think it.
I can do king d7.
But this is not yet a threat.
This is not yet a threat.
So if I, but I can't do it. Yeah, like if it's a zugzwang like situation.
It's a zugzwang, yeah.
If king here, then
king e7.
This is what we wanted. So king d6 check.
So let's say king f6, for example.
Okay.
Now king d7.
But we can't do this.
No, because then the same thing. No, he'll go to the a file eventually. Like if you play
king g6.
Yeah, king g6.
And we are not able to get clear Lucena because he will keep on checking
He'll
here.
keep on checking here, exactly. And you are not on time to get the rook g1 move either.
Right. So king d7.
King d7. And now he's fixed. Like he cannot move the rook because of e7. So he has to play king g7. And then you play king e7. You pass the move. You don't play e7 because of king f7.
This is a draw as we just saw.
Yeah.
So king e7. And once again he's in a zugzwang.
Yeah. Now he has to play king g6. Now we do the trick. Now we play rook a1, rook a2, whatever. Then after all these checks, you go to c6, rook b2, and now you have the move rook e1. These are again very theoretical. I know many people might know this, many people might not know this, but it's good to revise. And it's also important that in order to understand the upcoming endgames, we have our basics right.
Right. And Surya, just to connect the previous position to this one, if in this position white were to play a bad move like rook d7, then we reach the previous position.
Yes.
And this is, we already know this is a draw.
Yes.
Where we saw all these
rook
ideas
d6,
with rook d6 and so on.
Yes.
So
I think this is good enough for us to wrap up this pawn with pawn on e6, let's say. I think now, yeah.
Let's go to the next.
Let's go to the next one. Yeah.